And I remember looking in his eyes and seeing tears in his eyes and rolling down his face. I had never, ever seen my father cry in my life until that point. I recalled as a child my uncle telling me that, hey, men aren't supposed to cry.
Welcome back to another episode of What About Us, the podcast where we discuss the intersectionality of eating disorders, identity, white supremacy, and everything in between. I'm your host, Meileen Arroyo, and today's guest is Giovanni Bazan-Espain, second-year business major at the University of Oregon, and the president of the Latine Male Alliance. Our topic for today is understanding machismo, not just as a cultural concept, but as something lived within family dynamics. Giovanni will explore how his mental health journey, the impact of his father's deportation in 2013, and the responsibilities he carried as the only son have all played a role in shaping his view of what masculinity means. Welcome, Gio, to the podcast.
So nice to be here, Meileen. Thank you so much for having me.
Alrighty, well, can you start off by sharing a little bit about yourself and your background?
So I am a 20-year-old second-year student born in a small town in southern Washington called Pasco. And after just 3 days, I moved to Hermiston, Oregon. And yeah, I grew up with two sisters and both of my parents. So yeah, we were a full household.
Amazing. What was it like living in Hermiston?
So Hermiston, in terms of its values, it's definitely very conservative, very old school. It's a very small town. I mean, if I were to give you a tour of the whole town, it'd probably be a 15-minute drive. Hermiston's very small, and that's a very tight-knit community.
So let's start the conversation with one word, machismo. This may bring up certain feelings and thoughts for you. It's a complex social ideology with associations to Latinx culture. Rooted in Spanish conquest and Catholic influences, machismo shows up as this cultural expectation that men have to be strong, dominant, unemotional, and always in control. It's an idea that can shape how boys are raised, how families function, and even how people understand what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman in relation to a man. For some, it can represent strength and protection. For others, it carries pressure, silence, or even pain. Gio, when you think about machismo, what comes to mind first?
That's a really great question. When I think about machismo, I think of social constructs and unrealistic expectations where a man has to be stoic, where a man has to hold in their emotions per se. I think of unreal and unrealistic social constructs when I think of machismo, because when it comes down to having to show your emotions, it's almost, I don't even think it's almost, I think it's impossible to hold those in.
Yeah, for sure. And growing up, what were some of the earliest examples of machismo that you noticed in kind of your family dynamics?
So I have to give my dad credit where credit is due. So me and my father now, we have a very, very good relationship. We talk every day. I try to give him a phone call every now and again. But I don't know how he personally broke the machismo kind of lineage in his family. My dad grew up in a small rancho in Michoacan, Mexico, just 15, 20 minutes outside of Morelia, which is the bigger town in Michoacan. And he grew up working on a corn farm and a cattle ranch. And his days when he was a kid, his days consisted of going to school, working, coming back to work, and then going to school again. And that was up until he was about, I'd say 12 years old. But my grandfather was the one who took him out of school and said, now you're going to be working full time with me. And my father said something that I'll share with you that I'll never forget, and he's never forgotten, that school is just for women. Work is for the men. When I think of other moments where I've seen machismo in terms of expressing emotion, that's where I've seen it. I remember being a kid and my mom was doing something with me. I can't recall, but what I can recall is what my uncle said, who was just visiting, but he was still at the house. And he said, like, mijo, cálmate, que los hombres no lloran, hay que ser fuerte. So, son, don't cry, men don't cry, stay strong. I was talking to my father about wanting to go to therapy. And he was very, very against. I mean, I had always talked to him about it since I was probably in middle school, but this was one thing that he was holding his holding his line on that no man should be going to therapy.
All right. So you grew up with all sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that must have been a significant kind of experience in your life, especially kind of like with maybe shaping your perspective on gender roles and gender identity in general. Do you feel like being surrounded by women in your life gave you a different perspective on masculinity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I heard a lot growing up that a man has his feminine side.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, that could mean a lot of different things for some people. Like, it could be like how I remember just hearing from my friends back home that the way I walk or like my hand gestures are feminine. I don't know what that means, but, and then a lot has to tie into perspective as well. How you can kind of see things, engage things. And I'm not going to lie to you, this would help out a lot when it came to relationships growing up, seeing and putting yourself in the other person's shoes.
Going back to what we discussed earlier about mental health, I think that's one of the biggest like associations in machismo is kind of the idea that men aren't allowed to express their emotions. And that being masculine means that you not only have to be physically strong, but also mentally and emotionally strong. Whereas on the opposite side, women are portrayed to be fragile and sensitive. With that being said, did you learn anything about communication and feeling your emotions from being around your sisters, if at all?
Yeah, I did for sure. Yeah, because I'm always a person who will communicate my feelings as best as I can. And I did that a lot growing up. Now, that came with some pushback from some male figures in my life that, hey, you don't need to overshare. Why don't you keep some things in? So, yeah, I mean, my mother was always big on talking about your feelings. Speak. Growing up, I was a kid who was sort of seen as the crybaby because my mom specifically would allow me to express my emotions even if it was within tears.
Have you ever struggled with your mental health before?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I was diagnosed with anxiety when I was a junior in high school, and I have to give credit where credit is due to my doctor at the time. I feel like I connected with him because he was a Colombian male.
Okay.
So we shared that cultural connection and also that the gender aspect as well.
Definitely.
And I had to learn as well because he was part of the LGBTQ community as well. So he kind of offered me a different perspective. And I remember we would talk a lot. And funny enough, he was just my pediatrician. So because I did have prediabetes growing up, so we did kind of have to watch my blood sugar. But I lost weight and my blood sugar was at a normal level. And then I started noticing, I'm talking to him a lot. Like at a certain point in time, I was considering him my therapist. I would talk to him a lot about the pressure of going to school again, going to college, and then how much pressure my parents were putting on me on the education aspect. And then he kind of started pressing in terms of like questions. I remember he gave me a questionnaire that the doctors give you for a mental health check-in. And I remember, I guess I scored high on that. And then, I mean, long story short, he said, Gio, I think you have anxiety. And I was like, whoa, I don't think I have anxiety. I think I'm just nervous. He's like, but you're nervous all day and every day. That's not normal. And he's like, I'm not saying that's bad, but that's just not normal. And then we started talking, we started working through different ways. I mean, breathing techniques. I mean, anxiety is something so big, and I think something so prevalent in Latinx community that's not talked about enough. And especially those in post-high school education, especially with the pressures that we're talking about, being a first-generation student. I mean, difficulties financially, and especially what's going on currently with politically. I mean, there's a lot of pressures, and it's very difficult. But eventually, it started building. My anxiety started building, and I just couldn't really. The breathing techniques, the other recommendations he gave me to kind of tolerate it weren't really functioning anymore. So he offered me medication for anxiety, and immediately I said no. I said, I can't have my family knowing that the only son in their family is taking medication for mental health. I can't have that on me. I think a lot about being a role model for my little sister. I want to leave something that my sister can look at when she's my age and say, wow, my brother did all this. Mm-hmm. My brother did X, my brother did Y, my brother did Z. And that's encouraging me to follow that or do something different, but to the same scale. So I thought a lot about my little sister, but I didn't want to be seen as someone weak. I'll just say it like that. Yeah. In the moment, I didn't want to be seen as somebody weak. And I didn't want word to get out to my family. It didn't just have to be like my household, but also my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, my friends. But I think what did help a lot was accepting the fact that this is okay. Anxiety is something that affects all humans on all different scales and all different levels. And accepting that is not going to make you seem any weaker like how I previously thought. It's not going to make you seem like you can't be an exemplary student, a role model, X, Y, or Z. So I think by simply accepting that, I've been able to deal with it and, continue my life and not have it overshadow me. You kind of have to switch the term. This isn't something that's overtaking my life. It's a part of me. I'm going to carry it with me. But because of that, I'm learning to be better for myself.
Because you were the only brother, mm-hmm. and you said how you wanted to be a role model for your younger sister, mm-hmm. was there ever pressure to be the protector of the house, even at a young age?
100%. Because when my father wasn't in the house, when he got deported, I mean, you're only 9 years old, but you kind of have to care for your mother and your older sister. My younger sister wasn't born at the time. As a kid, you feel like you're the man of the house. I remember my father telling me that before he left, mm-hmm. that you're going to be the man of the house for a little bit. He didn't say how long. Ended up only being a year, 9 months to a year, but he said you're going to be the man of the house. And when you hear that, you're like, you kind of pump up your chest a little bit. Yeah. You're like, okay, yeah.
It's like an honorary title,
exactly, right? Yeah. I'm like, that's so cool. But now what does that entail? Like, so I really couldn't do much, but I was there for specifically my mom. I mean, she's been a big figure in my life. I mean, I always tell her this because we talk about it quite a bit. I always tell her, I say, Mom, I don't know what you were putting in your coffee in the morning. I don't know what you were eating. I don't know how you were waking up, how good you were sleeping, but I will never understand how you were able to do everything on your own for that long. I mean, she was just working in the fields for 10-hour shifts, and she had to come home to care for a 9-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter. Mm-hmm. I will never understand how financially, emotionally, spiritually, with her husband in a complete other country, I will never understand how she did that. And her answer is always the same. She said, I don't know how I did also. And it's unfortunate because no child should have to go through this. I mean, I remember the process I would have to do every day after school. Luckily enough, I lived right across the street from school in elementary school. And it's still like that right now in Hermiston. So my little sister does that as well. I remember, like clockwork, I couldn't stay after school to play soccer with my friends or hang out. I immediately had to run back home at 2:30. And then once I got home, my mom gave me a key to the house. As soon as I got home, I couldn't tell anyone that I had a key to my house because she didn't want none of my friends coming home with me. So at 2:35 on the dot, my mother would call the house phone. She'd call the house phone, and if I would answer, that means I got home safe. We talk. She said, "Okay, I'll be home at this time." She knew if I never answered that something was wrong. Luckily, I would always answer the phone on time because I knew this wasn't something to play about.
If this is too much of like a personal question, feel free to not answer.
Okay.
But I'm kind of curious, what was that year like?
Yeah, from what I can remember, I mean, I didn't really realize the severity of the situation. My older sister, my mom, our closest immediate family knew the gravity of the situation. But me, I just really didn't understand. I thought, okay, my dad's going to go visit his parents that he hasn't seen in 10 years, but he'll be back. So I remember going to courtrooms. I remember going to lawyers' offices in Yakima, Washington. So seeing that definitely shifted my perspective. Like, in terms of my household, I never had to worry about a meal. I never had to worry about getting to school. But talking to my mom, in reality, we did. But she never made it seem like that. Sometimes she would probably go without. She never shares this with me, but I can only imagine that she probably went some days without eating. And then eventually dropping him off at the airport, him giving me a hug and leaving. And then I didn't see him until actually 6 months later, where I don't know how she got enough money to pay for 3 plane tickets to Mexico, but for 3 weeks we were in Mexico and I was able to be with my dad. I remember when it came time to leave back to the US without my dad, but I remember my dad kind of got on one knee and hugged me, and I remember looking in his eyes and seeing tears in his eyes and rolling down his face. I had never ever seen my father cry in my life until that point. I recalled as a child my uncle telling me that, hey, men aren't supposed to cry. Wait, but my father's crying. So it kind of starts that conflict in your mind as a child. Does a man really cry? Does a man not?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that perfectly goes into what I was going to ask you next about kind of balancing both sides and navigating that like conflict. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this conversation is the question, at what point does masculinity become toxic? Because masculinity itself isn't the issue. It's an expression just like, femininity is. But I think when it moves into something restrictive, there's a lot of harm in that. So to start the conversation, Gio, what does healthy masculinity look like to you? And what are some ways that you express that?
I think it all kind of ties into the openness that you have and the acceptance. We hear it all the time that men need to speak up about their mental health. I mean, Movember and all these movements, like, yes, these are very important, but I mean, at least in my experience, you kind of ask yourself, who do you speak to? Is that a friend? But I don't want to add more. I don't want to add like a burden to that friend. Do I tell my parents? Oh, but my parents are going to judge me. So I think masculinity kind of starts getting toxic also with these unreal constructs as well. Like, you're telling me I can't ever cry? What if, I get like, I don't know, like, what if I get cut?
What if I break my leg?
Yeah, exactly. What if I get hurt? Like, I'm going to shed a tear for sure, like, to expect everyone to be, like, to follow that line, it's unrealistic and it's toxic. But I think where it's healthy is in your openness. And again, that can apply to different people. Some people maybe don't want to share that, and that's completely fine as well. Some people like me, I'll share it because maybe my lived experience can help you.
And in your opinion, what do you think is the impact of toxic masculinity on men of color, specifically Latine men?
I think a very difficult part of that has to tie into the acceptance of mental health and then also substance abuse. That's something that's not really talked about too. It's like I'll talk to a lot of people, and I mean, with party culture in college and especially with men of color and Latin men, it's like, oh, you don't like this drink? And then it goes into negative comments like, oh, you're this or you're that, like very insensitive comments because maybe you don't like a certain drink. Yeah, I mean, mental health, that's a big thing that's still kind of difficult for Latin men to share. And I think together as a community, we've been working towards talking about it.
Yeah, and I think going back to what you said about mental health and that substance abuse aspect in Latine culture, I feel like a big part of that is what you said earlier too, of like it's hard to reach out to other people or like talk about your emotions with friends or with parents or just people in general. I feel like you have to kind of find other coping mechanisms or other outlets for you to kind of like express yourself or find comfort in other things, and that's when it gets unhealthy of like, oh, I don't have anyone to talk to, so now I'm gonna go to alcohol, or I'm going to go to drugs.
Yes.
Or I'm going to go to food restriction, which is another thing that I talk about eating disorders.
Yeah.
Is like eating disorders aren't just about, oh, this person doesn't want to eat. It's an emotional thing. Like they're going on, there's something happening in their life and they can't talk to someone, so they use food as a coping mechanism to kind of go through that. Transitioning back into something that we talked about earlier of how people have both masculine and feminine sides. And you said you're not like quite sure about what a feminine side means, right? I kind of want to challenge that.
Okay.
And ask you, for you, what would you define your feminine side to be?
Okay.
Do you think you have a feminine side?
I mean, I think I do. I've heard a lot of different how would I word this? A lot of different definitions for it. Okay. So I think for me, definitely something that I would say in my feminine side is that I really enjoy reading like poetry. I really enjoy those stories because I connect to that very, not just physically but also spiritually. But I still need to kind of learn about what is your feminine side. I feel like with learning and hearing what a feminine side could be and some examples, I feel like I could connect with it more.
Yeah. One of the last things that I wanted to talk to you about is your role in LMA. As president of LMA, how are you kind of building awareness on machismo and men of color issues through your role?
Definitely by opening up the community and allowing that inclusivity. Like, hey, LMA is a space where you can come in. We're open once a week on Thursdays, 6:30 in the EMU, as a place where you can just meet and connect with people with Latine men. And we have other members who they aren't Latine people, but they connect with the culture because maybe they've grown up in a big community that has a lot of Latinx people. So I feel like having that inclusivity and learning about other people's lived experiences, I feel like that helps out our community so much. Having that connection that, okay, I wasn't the only person who went through this. We kind of share that. Now let's work together towards a common goal.
Well, are there any last words, thoughts, anything you would like to add?
I think just one message for anybody listening and for me myself, it's just acknowledging the fact that whatever you may be going through, any high point, any low point, any obstacle that you face, know that it's valid. Know that it's okay to kind of go back before you go forward.
Thank you, Gio, for joining me in today's episode. Check out the description for information on how to be a guest and follow my creative account at @inmaysmind_ for more podcast updates and creative content. A special thanks to the artist Holizna, creator and producer of the song Warm Fuzz, which you hear in the beginning and end of this episode. Before I go, one thing to take away from this episode is to remember that you have people in your corner always. Do not be afraid to use your voice to talk about your lived experiences. Growth and change begins with acknowledging your struggles and speaking openly about them. Happy holidays, and thank you so much for being here. This is your host, Meileen, signing off.